Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we talk about real food and real results. Did you know that selling raw milk is illegal in 18 U.S. states? Much of the food our grandparents took for granted is now banned in what we call the land of the free. The argument? That processed food is much healthier and safer, thanks government. While you may get dizzy checking out the list of recent industrial food product recalls due to contamination, it makes you wonder why raw milk is so very illegal in most of our country. To help us figure it out, we're here with my raw milk dealer from Tennessee, Mr. Bradley Bleasdale. My wife Alyson and I met Brad at the Cookeville Farmers Market back when we lived in the Smoky Mountains a few years back, and after buying veggies and milk from him for a few months, he gave us some of the best fresh venison we've ever tasted in our lives. It was out of this world. In today's show, he's going to give us a lowdown on the controversy surrounding raw milk, food freedom, and what it all means to your health. Before we get to the interview, though, here's a review of, for the Wild Diet that just came in from Christopher. He says, the Wild Diet sums up the knowledge of the Fat Burning Man podcast and creates an easily digestible guide to the new frontier of health. Abel touches on nearly everything you need to know for a healthy life way. He even gives you guidance on the family dog and your children. This may be the best source for everyone looking for a nutritional change. It's simple, straightforward, and succinctly written. It would take 10 books to garner what he has put together here. From biohacks to standing desks, he covers the gamut. Thank you, Christopher R. Christopher, thank you so much for the review and your support, as well as the kind words. When I wrote The Wild Diet, I really wanted to squeeze a ton of stuff in there so that I didn't have to keep writing a new book every year like a lot of other people do. And I think it's a little obnoxious when new books keep coming out, because the hardest part for the author is really simplifying things and communicating a message of value to you in very few words, often small words. We can all use the big words if we want to, but it doesn't always help you. So, Christopher, I appreciate you pointing that out and finding value in the book and the podcast as well. Now, by the way, we recently became our own sponsor. And to celebrate, we're giving listeners like you a great deal on brand new goodies from what we're calling Wild Superfoods. Right now, you can save over $128 off your purchase of our Ultimate Daily Bundle when you select Subscribe and Save. You'll have all the health-boosting goodies of Future Greens, Mega Omegas, Vitamin D Stack, and Probiotic Spheres delivered straight to your doorstep every month. These are the same health supplements my wife and I and our families have been taking now for years to improve our own health. All you have to do to get them for yourself is head on over to wildsuperfoods.com/save128, the number 128. So wildsuperfoods.com/save128. And you can get that deal. But also, we're always running deals, so just check out wildsuperfoods.com in general. And to get all the latest updates, discounts, news, and cool info, make sure you're signed up for my newsletter. I'll send you a bunch of free goodies, including a really delicious cookie recipe. Just go to fatburningman.com and sign up there. You'll also find over 250 episodes of this show for free with no outside sponsors or nonsense. You can find that all at fatburningman.com. All right, on to this show with Bradley. You're about to learn how the ridiculous raw milk controversy ruined our food freedom, immune benefits of raw versus high-temp pasteurization and homogenization, the secret to the best-tasting fresh venison in the world, and tons more. Let's go hang out with Brad. All right, folks, Bradley Bleasdale is a public speaker and a small family farmer who specializes in fresh goat's milk and grows about 40 varieties of fruits and veggies for CSA restaurant and farmers markets. My wife Alyson and I actually met Brad at the Cookeville Farmers Market in Tennessee a few years back when we were living in the Smoky Mountains before that silly ABC TV show nonsense. But after buying fruits and or veggies and milk from him for a few months at the Cookeville Market, Brad actually gave us, this is a fun fact, I think it was 4 pounds of the best venison I've ever had in my life. The best. So Brad, really great to reconnect, man.
You too, man.
Now, I was just reading through your bio, which we had just kind of had little conversations, but enjoyable ones at the market. I was kind of trying to keep a low profile at the time. But anyway, we had some great conversations. I'm really glad that we're reconnecting, but this is the first time that I've really gotten the full taste of your story. So bring us back. You're one of 13 kids, and you say that you were literally raised on the wrong side of the tracks.
Yeah, I grew up one of 13 in a small town in Massachusetts. Nowadays, it's not so small. It's right outside of Worcester, which is the second biggest city. And I had an interesting time growing up. Like I said, we were right on the wrong side of the tracks. I think it was third grade when we got running water in my house, if I remember right.
Wow.
And my folks bought a couple of cows, and I loved the milk, but I hated milking them.
Sure.
And we always had a big garden. And when I went to college, I swore I would never, ever farm again. And then after college, I worked for a while, went to law school for a while, and with about a semester left in law school, decided I could stay with my wife or stay with law school. So I picked staying with my wife. And we ended up in Florida. I was a financial advisor, literally running the rat race, had a massive house. I think it was like 8,000 square feet or some crazy number. And really got tired of it. And thinking back to my youth when I liked to hunt and fish and grow things, I exactly on hitting 40 years old, I had that 40-year, the midlife crisis. So we started looking for land somewhere that we could afford, because with a mortgage on an 8,000 square foot house, you don't have any money to buy land.
Sure.
And we ended up on about 55 acres up here in beautiful Tennessee, and decided to come up and live off the grid, homestead it, all that wild American dream, which if you ever get the feeling like you want to do that, hold your breath until the feeling goes away. It's or come and listen to somebody like me who will tell you all the mistakes I've made and continue to make, so you won't have to make them.
You started that before it was even trendy. Homesteading is trendy these days.
Yeah, I've always been a little bit, I'm the pioneer that sort of blazes the trail, breaking his legs along the way.
There you go. Well, I can say that there are a whole lot of fake farmers markets out there, and there are fake farmers at those markets these days. It's really astonishing. But from time to time, you meet some really great people who seem to be doing it the right way. So I would love to have you talk a bit more about how just the general tenets of what you think good eating is, because Weston A. Price is something that even for listeners of my show, they probably haven't heard that in a while, because we were talking before this interview of how the waves kind of come and go, and there was a big ancestral health moment back kind of when I was starting this show about 5-7 years ago. It was kind of, but it came and went, and a lot of people forgot the general tenets, and now people are all on the carnivore diet where they're eating nothing but meat. So can you talk about like what is balanced eating to you, and why do you do what you do? Why do you believe this anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I was never a real student of nutrition, and certainly compared to somebody like you, Abel, I'm still not. But it just never made any sense to me that when I was a kid and we were making butter and killing our own chickens and eating them, and then people tell me, when you eat a meal, the amount of meat you should have should be about the size of a deck of playing cards. And I'm like, that's like starvation rations. What, are you kidding me? I mean, I can eat, and do eat a whole lot more than that. So to me, it's more like I was at the Weston Price convention last week, and it's all about, I think common sense will tell you that if you look at an ingredient label and it's got more than 4 or 5 ingredients, it's just wrong. I don't know if you know Pat McNamara. He's a shooting instructor, a former Special Forces guy, and he says if it comes in a box, it's not food, it's a product.
Yeah.
And I stray a long way from that. I can tell you I don't eat anywhere near as well or as clean, but we try to grow stuff that as close to nature as we can get it. And that's the beauty of especially the raw milk, is it's a pure, fresh, raw, natural product that the USDA says is completely dangerous.
And illegal in a lot of places. I can't tell you how many times Alyson and I have bought milk for our dog. And boy, is it delicious.
Yeah, well, Weston Price leads the way getting it legalized. There's now only 7 states where it's completely illegal. And here in Tennessee, we have to do the herd share thing where you buy a share of the herd, kind of like buying a mutual fund. And but it's a free country, so you have to buy a herd share because you can't buy milk.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because we do supposedly live in a free country. But when you look at food, it certainly doesn't look that way, especially if you're a farmer, as I understand.
Sure. Yeah. A big part of the presentation we did up there was entitled Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Raw Milk. And the first part of it is demonstrating that not only is raw milk safe, it's really among the safest of foods that you can eat. And when you look at this massive organization that is the food, what's the word I'm looking for, regulations, right? There's the USDA, the FDA, the CDC, and they all work in concert to try to convince me that this is one of the most dangerous things that you can put in your body.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't want to be giving people something that's not safe, right? Well, I don't want to do that. So I started doing a tremendous amount of research on it. Yeah. And the health benefits, it's got beautiful amount of protein. It's got a beautiful amount of fat. It's got a beautiful amount of calcium, probiotics, enzymes, everything that we need. It's really one of the most nearly complete foods you can eat. And yet they tell us, I was on the USDA website, and it says there's no such thing as safe raw milk. Well, I'm looking at my buddy Abel here, and you look pretty darn healthy to me.
Our dog is too.
We're rolling the dice. We're rolling the dice, baby. And so I started looking into it, and the CDC did a study. It was 27 years, and it was all just about dairy products, and in particular raw milk. And what they came to the conclusion was, over that 27-year period, according to the number they came up with, 3 people died from ingesting raw milk. And so I'm like, well, that's almost 3 decades. That's 1 a decade, right? And then I'm looking at the dates on it, and I'm like, 27 years. Why does it go from 1987 to 2010? That seems a little strange to me. And so I did a little bit more research, and those dates are kind of bookended with 2 massive outbreaks of foodborne illness from milk that had been pasteurized. Yeah. So I don't know if they did it on purpose or not, but they left out the 1985 Jalisco cheese listeria outbreak that killed over 50 people from pasteurized milk.
Wow.
And a few years before that, there was a big one up in Massachusetts that killed a whole bunch of people from a pasteurization plant. And then, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Bluebell ice cream, obviously pasteurized milk, and several people died from that. So when you figure that right there in your home state of Colorado a couple years ago, cantaloupe carrying listeria killed 22 people in 1 year.
Wow.
And yet they look at me and say, raw milk that we think might have killed 1 a decade needs to be pasteurized, needs to be regulated, needs to be illegal to carry it across state lines. But I'm like, well, should we require the pasteurization of cantaloupe?
Right.
Perhaps we should say cantaloupe. Yeah, exactly. So when we look at the numbers, the CDC says, and if I'm boring you with these statistics, just
go
tell
for
me
it.
to stop.
I'm a geek.
But they say that based on their information, on the very highest estimate, 3,800 people a year die from foodborne illness. Well, nobody wants to die from foodborne illness, right? But that's everything. That's poultry, meat, fish, everything. So then when you do the math, 3,800 is 0.011% of the population of our country. Here's the way, there's problems we need to deal with, right? 22 military veterans a day commit suicide. Wow. 22 a day. 13 people a week are murdered in Chicago. We don't hear anything about that.
Right.
But there's a foodborne illness outbreak, and some people get sick or die, and it's, I guess the way I think of it is, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And when you're in that business, you have to find some nails to hit.
Well, the food industry, from my perspective anyway, is not built for small farmers at all, which is a bit ironic considering that was the majority of our population just a couple of generations ago.
Yeah, farming is now so scarce that it's not even listed as an occupation on the census anymore.
Wow.
And as you said, there is quite a revival and an interest and desire of young folks to get into farming, which I think is absolutely fabulous. And the problem is, a lot of times there's roadblocks that get in their way. And I'm like, hey, I tend to be a liberty lover. And I'm like, let's get those roadblocks out of their way. Because, when it comes to living in America, one of the things, I grew up in Massachusetts, so I have a sort of affinity for the American Revolution, and I can just picture in April 19th of 1775, right? And here's Captain John Parker mustering the militia on Lexington Green because, as we know, one if by land, two or by sea, the redcoats are coming. And as he mustered the men on the militia, he said, all right, men, the British are coming. We don't want war, but if they want war, let them have it. And if we prevail today and in our cause, 240 years from now, our great-grandchildren will go to jail for selling milk. Somehow, I don't think that would have been quite the rallying cry the Land of Liberty was looking for.
Well, it's especially preposterous. I didn't realize so many people got sick from pasteurized milk, probably because the media doesn't talk about it. How would you ever know it unless someone close to you died from having pasteurized milk or this cheese or ice cream, right? Like Bluebell was big when we were living in Texas, like everyone knew Bluebell. And it's a problem if people are dying from eating ice cream or lettuce or cantaloupe. There are serious problems with our food infrastructure. And it seems that, well, especially in America, we're all brainwashed into thinking that bigger is better when anything is concerned. And you can see that just fall flat on its face when it comes to food.
Yeah. And, on the one hand, I think generally speaking, and it's weird how we use the term a food system, right? To me, even that is somewhat ironic.
It is.
But the food in America is actually very, very safe. But we're not talking about pesticides. We're not talking about herbicides. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about genetic modifieds. We're not talking about fluoride in the water, all of those things. But generally speaking, our food is incredibly safe compared. And I've never been overseas, so I can't say. But I talk to folks that go there. They're like, don't drink the water. Make sure you boil everything before you eat it, that kind of thing. So on the one hand, it is very, very safe. On the other hand, especially, I read about these kids in Atlanta last year have a lemonade stand and the health department shuts them down. I don't know if you saw just a few weeks ago, I think it was Chicago. And there's a civic organization or a church feeding homeless people. Yeah. And the health department showed up with police and poured bleach on the food so they could not serve the homeless people because they said, you don't have a permit to serve food. Wow. And I'm like, that's just, after a while, you just say, well, what do you do with that?
I didn't vote for that. Did you vote for that?
I didn't vote for that. Sorry. It's just, so we live in such crazy times where it's like everything needs that regulation. And, when I was reading through the Declaration of Independence, and, when you read through how our country was founded, the whole idea, Jefferson starts it out, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we're all created equal, that we're endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then he says, we have a current governmental system that we don't like, but we shouldn't just throw it away. And he wasn't an anarchist, right? He wasn't saying, hey, we're going to chuck this so we can, kill each other in the streets. He said, no, we're going to set up a form of government that's appropriate to us. And then he lays out the offenses of the king to make his case as to why it's okay to throw off that form of government and establish a new one. And one in there that's very often missed, he said, the king has erected a multitude of new offices and sent out swarms of officers to harass us and eat out our substance. And when you look at that, and then you look at these regulations that carry the force of law, if I were to sell you milk, Abel, from my farm in Tennessee, well, that's not against the law per se. It's a violation of a USDA regulation, but it still carries fines and criminal penalties with it. So it has the force of law, right? Well, all of that stuff is codified in the Code of Federal Register, which is now so bloated that they used to update it every 5 years. It's now updated quarterly. It's over 180,000 pages. The federal
ensure
government
our
regulates
freedom.
the size. Yeah, they regulate the size of the holes in Swiss cheese. Do we really need a bureaucrat somewhere regulating the size? I think we can handle that mano a mano without it. So it's just it's very maddening. I'll give you go ahead. You're going to say something.
Well, I was going to say one of the reasons we moved to Tennessee for a while there and lived there for almost a year was because we were having trouble finding clean air to breathe.
Yeah.
In a lot of places where we like those places, our families live in these places, but it's like it will stop if you look at the data, with the numbers that they're already at of pollution, it will stop our hearts or shave years off of our lives. Already millions and millions of people die every year because of poor air quality. Yet they're loosening the regulations on drilling and polluting the air. And like, yes, we need to eat, but we also need clean water and we need clean air and we need to be free to live our lives. And so like the cherry picking of certain regulations aimed at small farmers. Just one example. This was heartbreaking for us because in Austin, especially when we were there, there was a great kind of craft food movement, farm to table, small scale people making craft stuff. And there was this one dude, Sebastian, who came over from France, who, for years we got pâtés and duck and all sorts of craft meats and bacons and things like that from Sebastian. And then we left for a few months. I think we went international, and then when we came back, he was gone. And so we went to the market and we asked some of the other people. It was like, what happened to Sebastian? And they're like, I don't know. He just stopped coming. I looked into it, and I looked up his website, and just in the couple of months that we were gone, I don't remember which regulatory agency came in, but they came into his operation, his tiny little, I think, organic farm, and demanded that he install 20 or 25 grand worth of equipment within the next 2 weeks, or else he's going to get kicked out and shut down. And so I found this page where he was trying to raise money in 2 weeks, to get all this stuff. And he's just like, I don't think it's going to work. And then that was it. Then he's gone. I had never heard from that man again. He made the best pâtés. He was the sweetest guy. It was just heartbreaking. But that stuff happens all the time.
Yeah. And, I get very, very sarcastic. So when I hear something like that, I'm like, well, I couldn't sleep at night knowing that those kids were selling lemonade without a permit. I couldn't sleep at night knowing that Sebastian didn't have whatever. And, when it comes to the milk in particular, right, because you look at what milk has in it, and it's like God created this perfect food, because not only do you get that nutrition, but the main thing that's in there to help is all the enzymes and probiotics that occur naturally in raw milk, right? Well, here's the crazy thing. There's about five main pathogens that can infect milk: Listeria and Campylobacter. And most of those, you were talking about, I forget what you're talking about. But anyways, most of those aren't in the milk. It can be contaminated ex post facto. And the enzymes, you have phosphatase that helps you digest the potassium, and you need that potassium, calcium, You have lipase, which helps you digest fats. They're all there to help you digest it, right? So you would think that since they require pasteurization, that the test to see whether or not your milk has been pasteurized is lack of those bacterial things that can harm you, right? Mm-hmm. That's not the case. The test to determine whether or not your milk is properly pasteurized, when they test your milk to see if it's done, they test for enzymes. And if the enzymes are there, that means it hasn't been pasteurized. Wow. So you have to kill the milk. So the only safe milk is dead milk. And
which goes bad faster in some ways, right? It's like going to spoil because there's nothing there's no good bacteria left to protect it.
Well, the way I look at it, my wife says it's a petri dish. You've made this petri dish with this nutrient in it that's now sterile.
Yeah, just a growth medium.
Sure. So guess what? If something bad shows up or something good shows up, the bad guys usually win then, right? And it's just madness. And then, your buddy there, Sebastian, who knows what it was he needed.
Right.
But did you ever lose a minute's sleep knowing he didn't have that $25,000 worth of equipment? No.
It was delicious. Always. Never got sick.
Yeah, exactly. So in Tennessee, for example, it's against the law to recycle egg cartons. You must buy new egg cartons. And it's like, it's just
in other countries they don't even bother refrigerating eggs. I was going to say my dad's side of the family, my grandfather, he was an organic farmer way back in the day, and they were also dairy farmers. And my dad told me that the way that they used to have yogurt was by from when it was, and I don't know exactly how it was done, but basically just kept warm out of the animal, kept warm, and let it grow. And
sure,
Dad said he's never had anything like it to this day, but they loved it.
Sure. And the thing is, pasteurization got to be popular in the States in particular right about the same time that indoor plumbing and an understanding of germ theory. Penicillin's only been around not even 100 years yet.
Sure.
So all of those things sort of had a happy nexus point. And, is there any doubt that when the milk was left in cans in the street and flies were landing in it from the open sewers that it was a bad deal? Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't want to drink that either. But with an understanding of cleanliness, proper hygiene, taking care of your equipment, taking care of your livestock, one of the dangerous bacterium is brucellosis, mm-hmm. and it used to be pretty common. It causes abortions and stuff like that. Well, there's fewer now than there's on average about 120 cases a year in the United States. Almost all of it from people who've gone overseas and contracted it there from milk from contaminated cows. So 2 years ago, it might have been last year, there was 2 cases in Texas, and the reason the people got brucellosis is because the little raw milk dairy decided to vaccinate its cattle against brucellosis, and the cattle shed the bacterium in their milk, which is not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And the people got sick from brucellosis. So in my mind, that wasn't the milk that caused the problem.
That's a perfect example of us trying to outsmart nature.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, there's no such thing as a perfectly safe food system. Are some people going to get sick from milk? Yes. Are some people going to get sick from raw oysters? Yes. And, but the onerousness of telling me it's illegal in Tennessee for me to sell you my milk is just, to me, that's beyond the pale. And yet I comply with the law.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's good to be aware that not all of these laws and regulations are there to serve us. I think that's important to know. Just because it is gray, or it almost always is at the farmers market, no matter where we are, kind of legal gray area to go home with raw milk. We're carrying contraband, It's even though it feels that way, there is great satisfaction in knowing that it comes from a real place, from people who take pride in what they do, because that, unfortunately, is such a rare thing these days. And I think you're a great example of that.
Well, that's like the wild diet, right? The closer we're going to get to nature, guess what? It's wild. It's a little more, a little edgy. Maybe it's a little dangerous in some regard. And yet, when do you feel most alive, right? Is when you're closer to that edge. Yeah. You don't feel real alive when you're sitting in your couch. But if you're out hiking through the Rocky Mountains, my guess is you feel pretty darn good.
Absolutely. But I want to say, too, on the point of, talking about meats, I believe it would have been illegal for you to sell me that meat of the venison, right? From your property?
Oh, yeah.
So
sure.
This is fascinating because I believe that the deer came on your property. You shot it. One of the reasons it tasted so good, you explained to me, was because you gutted it right away. You cleaned it right away. You took good care of the meat, and it was fresh. And like you just said, the wild diet. That's the name of my book. I think that's the ideal. Like if I called it the natural diet, it wouldn't mean anything because that word has been so abused, it doesn't mean anything anymore. But it's illegal to buy wild animal meat in the land of the free.
In most jurisdictions, that's for sure, yeah.
Which is very, very bizarre to think about, especially when you consider the herd populations of deer in particular. I know when I grew up in New Hampshire, there was a big problem with overpopulation, a lot of them starving out. There was a whole island where the population crashed because there were too many and they got too skinny, and then they sent in the hunters and that sort of thing. But it just seems there's no balance. It's like we have to eat from these industrial factory farms or else we're going to go to prison. Like that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's, people always ask me, well, why? Or, if, they say, well, there's a good reason for that. And when they say why, I always say, well, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I am a conspiracy analyst. I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
I like that distinction.
But when they say, well, there's a good reason for that because, and I know I sound like a one-trick pony, but I always go back to, is that reason good enough to tell free people that they can't do what they want to do with their own life, their own time, their own property? And for me, the answer, the majority of time, we ought to be erring on the side of, hey, that's his farm, it's his property, it's his life, and, leave me alone.
So
I cleaned up my language on that one.
I appreciate that. But let's compare a little bit. I think this might be interesting. Like your life before your midlife crisis at 40, and what's maybe surprisingly better now. That it's not easy ever, right? But like, what are the things that may have surprised you living such a different lifestyle now?
I'm a big believer in eating cholesterol, but my cholesterol was over 500 when I left Orlando, and
is that
now
right?
It's it was, but that was from stress. I mean, it was just crazy. So, let me make sure. Are you saying what surprised me about it?
Well, yeah. Like, what are the things that because I think you are living a life, unfortunately, that is so unique now. And a lot of people, especially like my generation and younger, have just lost sight of all, most of the wisdom, that comes from working with the land and living in a place that is free to you, or where you can be self-reliant, right? Where you don't have to participate in all of the machinations of culture and that sort of thing. So just like comparing the American dream achieved with all of the debt that goes along with it to where you're at now.
Yeah, well, part of a big part of the reason I wanted to move up here was to raise my kids. My oldest boy was 17 when we moved here. He's 32 now. And, it's every dad's dream that a kid would carry on with what he's doing. And he does the cow side of stuff. The milk that you got was from my son and his wife. And unlike me, he's an excellent businessman. So he does okay. But to see your son look at what you're doing and say, not only do I think it's worth doing, but I think I can do it better. Yeah. And then do it better. I mean, that is just so gratifying to see that happen.
Can imagine.
And a big part of it is, I started a school, the Sequatchie School for Self-Reliance. And a big part of it is self-reliance. So many people have none of that. And let me tell you, living on a farm, there's no money. When something breaks, you fix it.
Mm-hmm.
If the cold is going to damage your crops, you got to get out there like right now and make it happen like we're doing today, because we're going to get down to about 10 degrees tonight. So I spent most of the day covering crops. And the, getting your hands dirty in manual labor, there's just so much to be said for that. I read a thing the other day, Abel. It said young men in America between 18 and 30, the overwhelming majority of them not only had never changed a flat tire, they had no idea how to.
Yeah.
And I was talking with a friend of mine, and he said, I was talking about changing oil in a car, and he said, I don't change oil. I make enough money to buy a service contract so I don't have to. And I'm like, well, that's great, and I'm glad for him. But I still think knowing and understanding those fundamental skills is critically important for people. And it gives you, not only does it give you confidence, but it gives you a tremendous amount of satisfaction saying, we built our own house. Every stone in this house, we built it out of concrete and stone for the walls. Every stone came from our property. We bought a sawmill and milled the beams. My son and my two sons and my daughter were integrally involved in every aspect of building our home here. That's not an education you can get except experientially, and I don't think you can put a price tag on that. I think that's invaluable. So, living in the big suburb, driving the kids to all the games and all that stuff, there's nothing wrong with it per se, but I do think you're missing out on a big chunk of what's available. And I'm not saying you have to give it up to go try something like this, but why not take a weekend or a week and go out with your kids and get in the dirt and see what it's like to see something grow, see what it's like to butcher an animal and where your food's coming from, to know where your food is coming from, to see it growing, not driving by the cornfields, but to actually see it is something people are missing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are bashful or maybe even ignorant of the fact that they can visit farms. But how would they do that if they were interested in really knowing where their food came from? What would you recommend?
I'd just ask, our farm is, talk about the mistakes I've made, right? So one of the things I didn't know anything about is drainage. And we kind of built at the bottom of a hill, and the water comes off the hill where our house and barns are. So, about 9 months a year, it's like an ocean of mud. So that's not good. I'm still working on that. Yeah. But I'll tell you, there's a couple of good, there's an organization out there called WWOOFing, Willing Workers on Organic Farms. Mm-hmm. And we've had
years ago.
Yeah. And we did it for a while, and but it was tough on my wife having, the trouble is it's tough to vet the people that are coming, and we'd have these kids come for a weekend, and they basically just want to talk and smoke and hang out and not actually do anything a lot of times. And we've had some wonderful experiences. We have people stay with us for several months at a time. It's wonderful. But, you can get involved with that WWOOFing organization, look at local farms, and they'd be glad to have somebody come out just for a day. Down in Chattanooga, there's an urban teaching farm, Crabtree Farms, and they do workshops and volunteer stuff. They have been such a benefit to the whole local food movement in Chattanooga. It's just unbelievable what they do for us. And, that's finding an urban farm like that, and they're all over the place. It would be a great way to go as well.
Yeah. And to your point, there's a really interesting thing that happens when you do get just a little bit dirty. There's a wilderness survival guy who I had on the show a while back named
I heard that. That was great.
Cliff Hodges. And this, so he says, one of the first things that he recommends everyone do when they get out in the woods is take a handful of dirt and just smear it across their forehead, because it does something psychologically where all of a sudden you don't care anymore. You're an animal just being, and there's something to be said for that where everyone on their phones all the time, all showered and dressed up in pretty Instagram clothes and all this that you see. It's like, if you're not learning that other side, then someday it's going to creep up on you and scare you because, unfortunately, in the world we live in now, another thing we were looking for because we can work from almost anywhere, we chose to and tried to live in a bunch of different places. So we really loved the clean air in Tennessee and loved all the green grass. And there were so many things that we loved about it. But most people don't really get that experience where it's that outdoorsy type place, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
But why is that? Like, why do you want your kids to learn those old school skills that maybe they might have too much money for or will be too good for someday?
Why do I?
Yeah. Why do you think it's important that the next generation learns the old school stuff?
I think it's for a few reasons. First of all, if you don't have an appreciation of where you come from, it's really hard to appreciate where you are. And the idea, as I said, the idea of self-reliance and self-sufficiency is very, very important to me.
Yeah.
And then it also gives you an appreciation of just how hard other people work. So when you see how hard it is, let's say you go work with a construction crew for a day and you realize how hard those guys work to build the homes and the buildings we live in. You go to an auto shop and, it always has the sign that says, don't go past here for insurance regulations, but go through anyways till they kick you out. And watch how hard these guys making very low. I'll tell you what, go to the back room of a restaurant.
Yeah.
And you see people griping at restaurants because everything's not perfect. And when you work in the back room of a restaurant for a while and you see how hard those people are working like absolute maniacs to make sure you've got a decent meal. If you've never seen, I said to somebody a while ago, I said, if you've never worked construction, restaurant, or farming, and this is a broad brush, but I'm not sure you really have a clear understanding of how the world works if you've never done any of those things.
I would back up a trailer to that.
There you go. Don't have me back up your trailer, dude. Mine is. You don't want me backing anything up. They don't let me. My son won't let me back up his trailer. He's like, "No, I'll take care of that, Dad. No problem."
It's hard.
Holy cow! Yeah, it's not good. I'm very three-dimensionally challenged.
I get that. Well, you can't be good at everything, but it's important to feel like you could pick up the slack almost anywhere, right? And I think that is one of the things that we're being coached out of with every new product we buy is replaceable and expendable in some way. It's like once you this is funny, but like I was going through just a few days ago some old footage of tapes, tiny little high 8 tapes from my parents' old house when they moved. Of old performances and just childhood videos and stuff like that. And I was literally like learning how to re-splice tape again. And it was probably one of the most fun things I've done that I can remember in the past few weeks. Just like this old school project that seems so meaningless, that's kind of hard, that takes a lot of, fine tuning and finger work and what have you. It's a fun challenge. And there's something really physical about it too. It's like, I have, when I was a kid, I didn't have any money and playing music was so important to me. And I worked so hard to get the instruments that I had. Now I have more resources and like some of the instruments I have mean nothing because I just bought them compared to the ones that I literally put together or built way back in the day. There's something to be said. And I play the instruments completely differently because there's more heart in it. There's more, whatever the confidence that you get from self-reliance, from kind of building skills is there. And there's something really valuable about that I don't think a lot of people necessarily experience on a regular basis.
Sure. Yeah. For our school, I teach a lot of shooting classes. I do free classes for women all the time. And to see the change in people's demeanor when they come in. I've had people who've never even picked up a firearm. They're scared to even touch it.
Yeah.
And then I remember this one young lady from Washington, D.C. I taught her how to shoot. She'd never touched a gun in her life. And about an hour and a half later, she's like, well, what do you mean we're out of ammunition? I thought we were going to shoot all day.
Half an hour.
Yeah. And wow. It's just, it's a skill that you can immediately, I don't even know that I can articulate why it's so important, why it's so cool. I see the change in people when they learn how to do that, what I consider to be a necessary skill, in going from being afraid of it, being branded as something because they pick up a gun, to now saying, how come I don't own like one of these, and how come I'm not, have skill at arms? And it's really gratifying when you see all those things happen. You know the quote from Robert Heinlein, right?
I think you should share it.
Okay, well, Heinlein says, a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer. Specialization is for insects.
I love that. It is so good. But it makes. I am no gun fan. In fact, some members of my family have been, unfortunately harmed through guns. But I can see, and I have shot guns myself on many occasions, especially in the past. Little ones, big ones, and I'm game to try sometimes. And I am really glad that I have on those occasions, because what it made me realize in a very visceral way is that like life and death is in your hands. And what really tripped me up or made me think even more deeply about that is that's the way we should feel every time we get behind the wheel of a car, on our way to work. That's the way we should feel anytime we do something that could damage some other part of the world. Like every decision is that important, as if you're holding a gun. But going from that state of always being fearful to realizing the power that every human, for good or bad, has is something psychologically that must be experienced to be understood, I think.
Yeah, and I think way back in college, I had an interesting experience. I was living in New York State, and this lady I know had bought a car, and the state had passed a lemon law. And the lemon law said if you had 3 unresolved problems with your car, then the dealership had to buy it back.
Yeah.
Well, she had 3 minor problems with her car and decided she didn't like her car anymore, so she brought it back and figured they'd just hand her money back. And they're like, no, we resolved all your problems. You're not getting your money back. And she was just dumbfounded. And it's part of the whole consumer protection mentality is that I don't need to take responsibility for this stuff anymore because other people are taking on that responsibility for me.
Right.
Whether it's making sure my milk is pasteurized or knowing I can dial 911 even though the response time is 27 minutes. And I think a big part of the you're talking about self-reliance, it is self-reliance. The time, instead of saying the time may come when I need to rely on myself, I think it's if you can change your life pretty dramatically if you say, I have to rely on myself. And why can't I take on those responsibilities that other people are willing or able to take on for me? It's like health,
Yeah.
Why should I be responsible for my health if I can have other people? But it's a much more satisfying life the more that you take on. It's not easy.
It's humbling. I think that's what people don't like about it.
Yeah, well, it has been for me. That's for darn sure.
Well, because we're all bad at most things, if we're going to be honest about it, right? Like, we're not all specialists and experts at everything, that's for sure.
Yeah, but it's a great and yet hard question that you ask. And, we'd all do well to contemplate that more, I do believe.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. We're coming up on time, but there's so much more I would love to talk about. We get a lot of people asking about the difference between goat and cow milk. So some people, I think if you could just run us through that a little bit, that would be useful.
Sure. This is a jar of my son's cow milk. And the first thing that you'll note, can you see that? Yeah. The first thing you're going to notice is the cream on the top. Mm-hmm. The fundamental difference between goat milk and cow milk is goat milk is naturally homogenized. And what homogenized milk, it came about in the early part of the last century, is when you buy milk at the store, it's all just perfectly white, right? Well, that's because they've taken the milk and they've forced it through a tiny orifice at really high pressure, and it breaks up the fat globules. So in raw milk, the fat globules haven't been broken up, so they rise to the surface because fat is lighter. Well, goat milk, that doesn't happen. It's naturally homogenized. Those fat molecules are already quite small. So goat milk is much more readily digested. It's much less allergenic. Most of the real, guys like you, the health nuts, as I call them.
I'll take it as a compliment.
There you go. Most of them say, if you can get goat milk, get it. They're both great. The advantage of the cow milk is the cream. If you drink as much coffee as I do, you're glad to have that cream in your coffee. And it is, as you've experienced, kind of like drinking an ice cream cone. Goat milk is a little bit, it's a little bit of a wilder product. So and any raw milk, the flavor is going to change depending on what the cows are eating, if you put them in a new pasture. But goat milk does tend to be, it's a little healthier in regard to the absorption of the nutrients that are in there. It doesn't have, because the fat molecules are small, anytime you want something to taste really good, what do? Fry it in bacon grease, right? Yep. So that's the analogy I would use there. The cow
secret
milk,
to health right there.
Absolutely, dude. But I'm a believer. But when we do blind taste tests, it's funny. About half the people prefer goat to cow, and it's right around 50-50 until you tell them it's goat milk. Right. And they've been conditioned, because here's the big difference. If you buy pasteurized goat milk, that enzyme that's in there, lipase, gets activated by a little bit of heat. And that heat that lipase will immediatally start working on the milk and make it turn, just like anything turns flavor after a while. Mm-hmm. So it sort of accelerates. So I cannot drink pasteurized goat milk. I can stand pasteurized cow milk. Yep. I don't like it, but I'll drink it. But I can't drink pasteurized goat milk. So for all of those people out there whose only experience with goat milk is getting it at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or something like that, where it's pasteurized, that is not goat milk. Go find a quality farmer. Go to realmilk.com. Look in your state for a local raw milk place and get some real goat milk. And it's fabulous. I mean, and here's the other thing, Abel, that kills me. People will say, well, what am I going to do with a gallon of milk a week? And I'm like, there's many, many days I drink a half a gallon a day. And I don't really have a category for people who can't figure out what to do with a gallon a week.
I can tell you what we did. We made kefir or kefir or however you want to say it. We made yogurts. We put it in, the cream was delicious. That went first every time.
No doubt.
But we'd usually ferment a lot of the rest of it if we had extra. But man, it's different. It's so good, and it's hard to find. Cause we travel so much. You do have to invest some time, but it's not that much. Like you said, you just go to that website, look it up, and you'll find some sources that are hopefully relatively close to you. Now, what about before we go? I wanted to ask, because you do see these popping up in some of the health food stores. The low temp pasteurized, non-homogenized cow dairy.
Yeah, the temperatures, traditional milk is pasteurized at, I think it is 140 degrees for 30 minutes. And ultra pasteurized milk is like 280 degrees for 2 seconds. So the idea with the low temp pasteurization, if they can get it through the state, is the hope is that it's at a low enough temperature that it won't kill all the enzymes. And that's a good thing. I mean, if that's, personally, I wouldn't mess with it. But if that's, if somebody is completely concerned about whether or not their milk is pasteurized, that's not a bad alternative.
Sure.
Homogenization is an interesting thing, because when they started to homogenize milk, it was right after they started requiring pasteurization. And the reason for that is, if you haven't pasteurized the milk and then you homogenize it, as I said, those fat molecules are now very small. So the enzymes now have a much bigger surface area to work on, and it immediately goes rancid. So a fortunate coincidence was they require pasteurization, which kills the enzymes that help you to digest the fat. and then they homogenize it to make the fat globules smaller so it's easier to digest. So we kill the milk so we can homogenize it so we can digest the milk. Makes perfect sense.
We should probably regulate that before it goes from mother to child for all Americans. It's really quite absurd when you think about it.
Don't even get me going on that one. Oh my goodness.
We are almost out of time, but before we go, please tell folks a little bit more about what you're working on, your wilderness survival classes, and where folks can find you.
Yeah, the school is called the Sequatchie School. For self-reliance and survival skills. There's a county in Tennessee called Sequatchie County and a river that flows through it. And it's me and a lot of guys who are far more qualified than me to do this stuff. Our wilderness survival instructor, Josh McKinley. I don't know if you're familiar with the Tracker School up in New Jersey, Tom Brown's school up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's world famous. Josh has been to his school as of this year 11 times. He's just so he handles the wilderness survival stuff, the scratching the sticks together to make a fire. He does that in about 47 seconds. Just drives me crazy. And then we do emergency preparedness classes, trauma medicine classes. I do a lot of the ones I do are free. I'll be teaching down in North Georgia a basics of emergency preparedness class in a couple of weeks. And it's sequatchieschool.com. And we, as a big part of that too, we're going to be offering this year farming classes for urban farming, small scale farming right here on our farm in Spencer. And then my son and his wife, they broke off for marketing purposes. It's Orchard House Creamery for folks that want that yummy cow milk. And our farm is, and our farm is fallcreekfarms.net for what we got going on here. I am very technologically challenged. I mean, this is my second time on Skype. So
you're doing great. No, but really, Brad, thank you so much for spending the time with us. I know people will really appreciate this one. And it's so great to reconnect, but let's have you back on the show just to have another excuse.
Oh, it's been totally my pleasure, Abel. It's great to talk to you.
This episode is brought to you by Wild Superfoods and listeners like you. Whether you're looking to drop a few pounds, maximize performance for your next competition, or simply stay young and energetic, you need a name you can trust. That's why my wife Alyson and I created Wild Superfoods. Our nutraceuticals and cutting-edge health supplements are literally the products we've been taking ourselves daily to upgrade our nutrition and optimize our health for the past 3+ years. And we're extremely excited to say Wild Superfoods is finally ready for you, with much more to come. When you buy from Wild Superfoods, you're supporting a small family business, not a massive faceless corporation. We don't have any investors or stockholders to please, so our priority is you. We want to help you become as healthy as you possibly can be. Also, starting our own family company, it's kind of cool, has made it so we can create these shows for you without outside sponsors clouding our message of health. So if you believe in what we do, please check out Wild Superfoods. We think you'll dig it. And as a listener of Fat Burning Man, you can save over $80 on a one-time purchase or save over $128 when you select the subscribe and save option. Also, you can get free access with subscribe and save to our Fat Burning Tribe coaching and meal planning community. That place is awesome. I'll see you in there. It's usually at least $27 a month. So check out Subscribe and Save from Wild Superfoods if you want to get the tribe for free. We think you'll like it. So all you have to do is head on over to wildsuperfoods.com to order your very own health-boosting goodies for a big-time discount. One more time, that's wildsuperfoods.com. Thanks again for listening. Well, hey there, listener. This is Abel one more time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Fat Burning Man Show. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you might be listening to or watching this show right now. And if you have a second, please leave me a quick review for the Fat Burning Man Show. I read every single one of them, and every time you leave a review, it gives us a little boost in the rankings, and that helps other people find this show. And if you can think of someone else who might enjoy and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or a family member. And if they're like, what is this Fat Burning Man thing? That's a really silly name. You could be like, you're right, but here's the deal. We've recorded over 250 episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show with thought leaders in health from all over the world. And so far, we've won 4 awards, hitting #1 in health in more than 8 countries internationally. We have more than 30 million downloads already, but we're just getting started. I can't believe any of this, by the way, and couldn't do any of this without you, so thanks once again. But here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode of the Fat Burning Man Show for free with 0 outside advertisements, no outside sponsors, and no corporate overlords. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. I'll give you a second here just to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes, transcripts, and video and audio versions for all the past episodes of the Fat Burning Man Show for free. Better yet, enter your email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide so you can take your health into your own hands right now, along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free goodies with a bonus surprise straight to your inbox. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening once again, and have a great week.